Hey everybody, Diane Sawyer here with the Reidsville Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to part 4 in our Topics at 12 series. We are so excited to be in partnership with NC100 and their partners. We're going to turn it over to Merrill Holloway.
Good afternoon. If you may have noticed, I am not Diane Sawyer. My name is Merrill Holloway and I'm with NC100. And thanks for joining us for another Topics at 12. Been really great to be in partnership with the Reidsville Chamber of Commerce to bring you some really great events. And we talked about college debt, we talked about student planning, we talked about heirs property, and today we're going to be talking about employee ownership and succession planning. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Luke Hoffman from the North Carolina Employee Ownership Center, which I also get a chance to work with as a board member in Durham, North Carolina. So Luke, we'll hand it to you.
Great. Thank you, Merrill. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, and then I'm also joined by Mike Willard, who's the CEO of Salem Fabrication Technologies Group, which is an employee-owned company in Forsyth County, just outside Winston-Salem. And so I'll kind of be going over just what employee ownership is, the major forms of employee ownership, why it's so important, the benefits, things like that. But then Mike can kind of chime in with that real-world example of working at an employee-owned company and what that experience has been like, their story of converting to being 100% employee-owned, and all of that. So just a little overview on the North Carolina Employee Ownership Center. We're on a mission to protect jobs, increase community wealth, and create a more vibrant and inclusive economy through employee ownership. And we do this through telling stories, forging partnerships, and providing unbiased information. And just very high level, to make sure we're all kind of thinking about this in the same way, what is employee ownership? It is just a business model in which employees collectively own a percentage of the business for which they work. Mm-hmm. So why is this so important to us? We're kind of approaching this small business closure crisis. And so baby boomers own almost half of all privately held businesses in the United States. Some people have called this the silver tsunami, as these aging owners are kind of nearing retirement. And so the trends nationally are pretty similar here in North Carolina. Baby boomers, or people age 55 plus, own half of the businesses in North Carolina, roughly. So we did this big kind of data study project with an organization called Project Equity, which does a lot of employee ownership education and research and things like that. And they found that in North Carolina, there's almost 80,000 businesses with owners age 55 plus. And that these businesses employ almost 880,000 people, have payroll over 32 billion, and revenue over 165 billion. And so clearly that's a lot of businesses, a lot of jobs, and a lot of wealth that's being held and created by these owners who are nearing retirement age. Looking at Rockingham County specifically, around 57% of business owners are age 55 plus in Rockingham County. That's about 700 businesses, employing 6,000 people roughly, payroll around 208 million, and revenue around 1 billion. And so the question then kind of becomes, what happens to these jobs, these businesses, and all of the wealth that these businesses are generating when these owners retire? And so, some of these businesses may pass down to a family member, or, have a local buyer that keeps the business locally owned and operated, part of the fabric of the community. But we realize that realistically, a lot of these businesses will sell to an out-of-state buyer, sell to private equity, or simply just have to close down. And so employee ownership kind of enters in as a succession planning option that's out there that keeps the business open and locally owned, and that also benefits the employees because they have the opportunity to build wealth through kind of their share of ownership that they have. Stokes County, just to the west, that percentage is even higher. It's up to 67%. And so what we find is, especially in small and rural counties, generally that number of aging owners, that percentage of aging owners, is an even higher percentage. And so, especially again in small and rural places, losing a handful of businesses has a much greater impact compared to losing 3 or 4 businesses in somewhere like Greensboro or Charlotte or Raleigh. And so that's why, for us, this is really important all across the state, but especially in small and rural places. So I've used this term succession planning a number of times, but just a quick definition, succession planning is just a plan for someone to either own or run your business after you retire or exit. And so more than half of all small business owners do not have a succession plan. Understandably, a lot of business owners are focused on staffing, day-to-day operations, et cetera, and aren't thinking 5, 10, 15 years down the road, what's going to happen, what's my exit strategy. And an exit strategy isn't just about retirement. It could be because of death, divorce, disability, disagreement, distress. And so there are a lot of good reasons to start thinking, what's going to happen? What's my exit strategy? And so, like I mentioned earlier, a second ago, there are a number of options when it comes to succession planning, such as a family member, a management buyout, an outside purchaser, investor, private equity, et cetera. But we think employee ownership for a lot of businesses is a good option. And a lot of businesses just have a hard time finding a buyer. And so employee ownership is kind of an automatic buyer where instead of having to go out and search for a buyer and hope somebody wants to buy you and doesn't, just kind of pick your business apart, employee ownership provides a buyer and it keeps that business open and rooted in the local economy. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just wanted to chime in on succession planning. Back in the late 90s, our owner at the time spent about 2 years investigating ESOPs. So he spent 2 years to figure out how he could convert his company and monetize, his wealth by checking into ESOPs. Now let's fast forward to 2023. At Salem, we've got 2 key executives retiring December 2024, and then I'm going to retire middle of 2025. So we've already started that succession plan, and we've got mid-managers that we're going to promote and move up in the organization. So we've already started training with these key people, and we've got it laid out, who's going to take my role as well as other leaders in the organization. So, the key there is start early.
Right.
And your statistic on more than half of small business owners don't have a succession plan, that's very true.
So I didn't know this until I started kind of getting into this work, but there is a proven record in North Carolina in terms of employee ownership. There are over 160 firms that are at least wholly or partially owned by their employees, and that employee ownership benefits over 750,000 employees. And so what we want to do is expand that number, increase the number of firms that are partially or wholly owned by their employees, and the number of employees that are benefiting from that. So here are a number of companies that are employee-owned here in North Carolina. You may recognize some of these. I think a lot of people maybe have heard of Mass General if you've been up in the mountains or things like that, but a number of companies across the state. So some considerations for selling to the employees. In this case, we're talking about businesses that are privately owned. Profitable with good cash flow is really important to make sure that the financing of the conversion process all works out. It's really important to have experienced advisors who are available to help you through the conversion process. And that's kind of where someone like NCEOC could come in, and we could make sure you're connected with all the right folks. We are kind of networked with this ecosystem of employee ownership service providers, and so we can make sure that you're talking to the right people for financing, all of your legal considerations, company culture, all of those sorts of things. There are also a number of tax benefits, especially depending on the form of employee ownership utilized, both for the selling owner and for the company itself going forward. Also, it can increase business growth and resilience, and I'll get into that a little bit later. It also creates an attractive workplace for employees, increasing employee recruitment and retention. Workers, through their employee ownership, have the opportunity to build wealth, and that creates a really attractive workplace because if the business does well, the employees benefit financially, and so it creates a really strong incentive both to come work at the company and then to stay there long term.
Certainly at Salem, we have a very strong employee ownership culture. We hire and fire by those values, and when we interview people, the first interview they go through is a cultural committee interview, and those are just frontline employees. And the interview has nothing to do about skills. It's all about, do you fit into our culture? And this is what our culture is. And they ask questions around those 5 core values.
Yeah. And then finally, succession planning. Again, just to hit on that. is really important when thinking about an employee ownership conversion. So now I'm going to talk about the major forms of employee ownership. So in this session, we'll kind of be talking about just what these forms are, the benefits of them, and then in 2 weeks, we're going to be going more in depth into the conversion process and what that conversion process would actually look like. And so the types of employee ownership, the most common ones are an employee stock ownership plan, a worker cooperative, and then a perpetual or employee ownership trust. And then there are also a number of broad-based stock options that are out there, but we won't be going into that as much today. So the first one is an employee stock ownership plan, an ESOP. And so it's an employee benefit plan which can set aside or borrow funds to buy the departing owner's shares of company stock. These shares are put in a trust and allocated to individual employee accounts that vest over time and eventually are cashed in when employees retire or leave the company. And so Salem Fabrication is an ESOP. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So we've been at this for 23 years being an ESOP. It's been a great journey for us. I joined the company in June of 2019, or 2009, yeah. It's been a real good journey. It was a way for the owner at the time to sell, and he received great tax benefits. So in the early 2000s, we took a loan out for a third of the company. We had a valuation done with the company, took a loan out for a third of that. We paid it back in about 4 years. And in 2005, we took a loan out for 2/3 of the company, and we paid that out over several years. Became 100% employee owned in 2010. And he left the company, and he's still alive today. Talk to him frequently about employee ownership, and he's proud to see how the company has grown over the years. So we're very active in various ESOP associations, NCEO, ESCA. We have our own communication team at Salem talking about ESOPs. Like I said, we have the cultural committee that interviews candidates prior to the management team even having a chance to talk to them. We get valued every year. In fact, we'll probably get our share value communicated to us this week. That's done by an outside valuation firm. Again, that's done every year, and they'll communicate to us what that share value is. After that, we communicate that to the employees. Typically have a guess the share value contest to get their engagement and buy-in. So yeah, it's a great way to run the company. One of the other things we do is practice open book management. And we share all the numbers with the employees so they know what our profit and loss is every month. They know if we're winning or losing because we share the sales numbers every day with them, share the net income on those sales. Every Wednesday, 11:30, we have a company huddle. And again, we go through the P&L statement, talk about sales, and that way they know what the score is. You know, it's kind of like going to a football game and you get there late, okay? 10 minutes into the game, and you ask your guy sitting next to you, what's the score? He says, I don't know, there's not a scoreboard. So, you know, they've got to know the score. They've got to know if we're winning or losing. And, you know, we lay our company budget out for them every year so they know what our monthly sales number is for both equipment and supplies. So, very transparent organization. I think it's the best way to run a company.
Yeah, thanks. And then another example of a ESOP that's relatively nearby here is Columbia Forest Products in Greensboro. You may have seen them. I think it's 40. Are they along Highway 40, yeah. I think? Mm-hmm. So if you've driven down 40 and seen their building there, they are North America's leading manufacturer of hardwood, plywood, and hardwood veneer products. And they're also the U.S.'s 62nd largest majority employee-owned company. Mm-hmm. And so they're a big employee-owned company, again, pretty nearby to here. So some ESOP considerations in terms of the tax savings first. So if the company is a C Corp at the time of sale, the selling shareholder can defer capital gains tax indefinitely if they sell at least 30% of the company's shares to an ESOP. If the company is an S Corp, whatever portion of the company is owned by the ESOP, if it's 30% or greater, pays no federal or state corporate income tax. So for example, an 100% ESOP-owned S Corp would be tax exempt. Do you want to speak at all to Salem's tax status?
So that's absolutely correct. We got our Subchapter S status in, I believe, 2006. once we paid off the second loan. And I tell you what, it's a huge benefit. It helps us invest in the company, helps us invest in acquisitions, but also affords us the ability to pay some nice bonuses to the employees, assuming we're hitting the numbers. Last year we had record net income, and we paid out the highest bonus that we ever had in the past. So it was a good December and January when the employees were receiving those checks.
Right. Yeah, and then also ESOPs can boost company performance, like you have mentioned and touched on, especially if combined with some form of participatory management, again, like open book management, like you mentioned. And generally, it's best suited for companies with 20 or more employees and strong cash flow. Do you know how big Salem was when y'all converted?
Yeah, I think it would have been around 55 employees.
Okay.
We're up to 75 employees now.
Okay.
But yeah, those comments are correct. Typically, over 20 or more employees, and they've got to have a good balance sheet, strong cash flow. But with that said, there are some ESOPs that are less than 20 employees. So it just depends on the industry you're in, and again, what your financials show.
Right, and because of that, that annual valuation that you mentioned, there are fairly significant administrative costs, but because of those tax savings for a larger company, it ends up working out pretty well that the benefit of the tax savings outweighs the administrative costs.
Right. So, the additional cost with being an ESOP, you have your third-party administrator that's going to process your stock certificates and also disperse the monies appropriately throughout all the employees. You're going to pay for a valuation firm to do the annual valuation. Ours is around $15,000 a year, I believe. You're going to have to write up a plan for the ESOP, and so that's typically done with a ESOP attorney. So we just updated our plan. Typically every 5 years you update your plan just to reflect the current day changes of what's going on within your company.
Yeah.
So I think those would be the three additional expenses you would incur with an ESOP.
Right. So next we'll talk about cooperatives. And so a worker cooperative is a business entity owned and controlled by its members. And so it's governed by bylaws that address how members join or leave the co-op and how profits are distributed. And they operate on the principle of one member, one vote. And so in an ESOP where there's shared equity, and maybe there's a level of shared governance depending on how the company is run, in a cooperative, inherent to it, there is both that shared equity and that shared governance. And so an example of a cooperative here in North Carolina is So True Seed, and they provide high quality open pollinated seeds in support of sustainable food production and regenerative agriculture, and they're based out in Asheville. Some cooperative considerations is it can be a good fit for smaller companies. A lot of times fewer than 20 employees. There are cooperatives that break that mold and are much bigger, but a lot of times it works well for a company that's smaller. The employees know the company really well. They're invested in what the company's doing, how it's operating, etc., and are fit to be able to take over the company and play a part in managing it and owning it. So there are fewer administrative hurdles than an ESOP, but there isn't that tax savings that an ESOP gets. And like I mentioned before, there's that democratic structure and that shared governance. And unlike an ESOP, where shares are sort of gifted to the employees, there is a cost to buy in for employees to get their ownership. And generally, that's just a percentage that's deducted from their paycheck over time until they've bought into the company. So an example here is Electric Violin Company. They're a cooperative, and so we can watch this short video. So since we don't have a cooperative or somebody from a cooperative here, like we have Mike to talk about ESOPs, we'll watch this quick video.
Well, I think here in North Carolina, we still have preserved the small town approach. We're not as into big, huge business. The concept of taking your business to a co-op conversion in one way or another kind of is in resonance with the whole kind of relaxed, friendly Southern approach. The owners are in the neighborhood, the customers are in the neighborhood. There was a time in 2006 where I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And luckily it was caught early and I could have a treatment that was successful. And so since 2007, when I had that procedure, I've been thinking, well, how will I exit electric violin shop? I had even tried regular business brokers, and those are, I don't recommend, because they take your money up front and all they basically do is make a listing and put you on a website somewhere and maybe help you field inquiries. So, and I had hired Ann Claire Broughton as a consultant. She helped me look for various people to purchase the business for a while. This was like 2015. And at some point late in that summer, she said, well, why don't you convert it to a co-op? And I said, you can do that? Because I thought co-ops were grocery stores or something that was really essential to the community, not a music store. So we proceeded with the steps. My employees were really interested in becoming business owners because none of them had any resources to purchase a business. So when they found out that none of that was required and it was the health of the business that was the asset, then they got excited about it. The co-op conversion was made, there was a closing, and I retired with some money in my pocket. The employees got a deal, I got a deal. They're business owners, and we're almost 5 years out, and they're still going strong, even with COVID. It was all very clean, clear, and it just seemed like, small town America, to go to co-op.
All right, and then next we'll talk about employee ownership trusts. So I think I mentioned this earlier, but it's a relatively new form of employee ownership to the US, but it's been more common in the UK. And so in an EOT, a trust holds shares of the company on behalf of the employees who participate in annual profit sharing. And so unlike an ESOP, an EOT is not a retirement plan. So instead of cashing out employees when they leave, employees are part of profit sharing only during their employment tenure. And so North Carolina recently got its first employee ownership trust, which was ShopBot Tools. And so I think I have the video. Okay, I think it's the next slide after that. But we'll hear from the owner of ShopBot Tools in a second. So some EOT considerations. It allows the company to remain employee-owned in perpetuity. If that's what the departing owner wants, the trust can be set up that way. There are low administrative costs. For example, there isn't that annual valuation that you have in an ESOP. However, similar to a cooperative, you don't have that favorable tax treatment that you get with an ESOP. And again, it's current profit sharing rather than a payout at retirement as done in an ESOP. And there are around 15 in the US, and North Carolina currently has one, which is ShopBot Tools.
One of my missions in life is feeling like if we can bring some manufacturing back to our communities, we'll have brought a lot of value back to our communities. We make tools that empower small businesses and small manufacturing operations. And so we're really keenly interested in the problem of small business and particularly small manufacturing. This emphasis on getting employees, getting everyone involved in the business, engaging them and thinking about how we develop, how we grow, how we help our customers develop and grow has been pretty important to us. We see that employee ownership can actually play a big role in helping reinforce that kind of engagement. An employee ownership trust, or an EOT, which we frequently refer to it as, is an employee ownership arrangement where all of the shares of the company are owned by a trust for the employees. Employees don't, as individuals, hold equity in the company. They don't have individual shares in the company, but rather a trust holds all the shares in perpetuity for the benefit of employees. The idea of that kind of structure is that what you want to do is maximize the likelihood the company continues to operate profitably and attractively within the community that it's grown up in. It's easy to make the case for an employee ownership trust for small businesses simply because it's so much less administratively involved and so much less expensive and offers so much freedom in how you lay out the nature of the deal and the final kind of arrangement I think you could ask the question, well, as the company gets bigger and there are more employees involved, maybe you could argue that an ESOP makes more sense. But frankly, I see no reason not for everybody to be doing employee ownership trust rather than ESOPs. They are so well suited to the 21st century, to the way we're operating, to people's lives, that they make a lot of sense to me. ShopBot has always kind of promoted the idea of engagement, involvement of employees in the company. We've been profit sharing all along and open books all along. And that meant in our early years that we would discuss the books and how we were doing quarterly. More recently, probably in the last 5 or 6 years, we got involved with a program called The Great Game of Business that emphasizes using open books and more actively using them, engaging people, such that at ShopBot nowadays, we talk about ShopBot's P&L and how we're doing every week, and employees actually contribute to mapping the data out and discussing it.
Every week as a company, we forecast to identify our resources, identify problems before they become a problem, and to reach our goal.
We're striving to be a very successful company, and at its roots, the EOT is, it's a profit-sharing model where if we're ultimately very successful in what we do day in, day out, year in, year out, then the employees are going to greatly benefit from that because there'll be more profit sharing to go along.
By moving to the employee ownership model, it allowed us to move forward with what the vision for the company is, both the way we function now as well as the way we want to move forward into the future.
There are 4 groups really that an EOT, an employee ownership trust, serves. First, they're the employees, who really are intended to be the primary beneficiaries. But there is also the community that the business is situated in. There are the customers who the equipment is being produced for and hope to be able to maintain their tools and continue using them and be supported in the way that ShopBot already supports people. Finally, there are the shareholders. Each of these groups can benefit in an EOT, and I think we have with EOTs the opportunity to design, grow a kind of apparatus, organization, functionality that really serves everyone well. We like to think that we're going to thrive and we're going to grow in the community, bring value to it, and all our employees are going to be outrageously well paid. We hope that's going to happen.
We have so many people here that do care about the product, and we've got employees that own ShopBots, and we want to put our best into it because that's how we want to treat our customers the same way, because we think it's such a great product and we think that they're going to think it's a great product.
As an EOT, we empower people, we listen to their ideas, and we work together as a team.
On our own, we each have our own strengths and weaknesses, but when you put us all together, we are ShopBot. We all feel invested in the business. We all have a stake in the business, and becoming an employee ownership trust actually reinforces that more than anything else.
Everybody's kind of grown up with us. They're part of the approach, they're part of the mindset that we have here, and it's very easy for me to be very confident that things will go well and that ShopBot will be around for a long time helping people make cool stuff.
All right, so now we're just going to talk some about the benefits of employee ownership. So some of the benefits to businesses are higher productivity and growth, lower employee turnover, and improved longevity and lasting legacy by using it as a succession planning tool. Some of the benefits to workers are better pay and benefits, assets and business ownership, which is the big one, that opportunity to build wealth through their ownership, and then having a voice in key company decisions. Some benefits to communities, increased local spending, heightened civic engagement, and community wealth building. And then we'll get into this a little bit more. So employee ownership helps a business with its growth and with its resilience. The National Center for Employee Ownership, NCEO, found that on average, employee-owned companies have 2% higher sales and employment growth year after year. Rutgers University found that employee owners are 6 times less likely to be laid off and 50% less likely in the last 2 recessions. And so I think both of these stats just kind of, again, point to the growth that employee-owned companies can have and the resilience they have as the economy kind of goes up and down. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, it's with the employees in an ESOP, it's always a challenge to get their buy-in to it, okay, especially the younger folks, because they're living today, they got young kids, they got expenses, and while they see their share value increasing nicely, they can't touch it, okay? So it's convincing them to stay on board, and your share value is only going to increase as you stay here. And they say, yeah, Mike, I get that, but I took my recent stock certificate to the Shell station to fill up my car, and guess what? That certificate wouldn't fit into the little ATM pump thing, So you've got that challenge. They want and they need the money now. Now, older employees where their kids are raised, probably through college, they get it because their account balances are well into the 6 digits. So it takes a lot of selling every day, every week, every month, and some people get it, others it's a challenge for them.
Yeah. And then also from kind of the employee recruitment and retention angle, it seems like employee recruitment and retention is something everyone's talking about these days, and issues with staffing, getting people not only on board and working for their business, but staying there somewhat long term and not just jumping around. And so I think I mentioned this before, but employee ownership creates attractive workplaces, offering employees better pay and benefits, a voice in decision making, and again, that opportunity to build wealth. And so research shows that on average, median wage income is 33% higher at employee-owned companies. Household net worth is 92% higher because they're able, again, to have that piece of business ownership. And then median job tenure is 53% higher. And so I think it kind of shows that employee-owned companies not only give that ownership, but also they're companies that just care about their people and care about their employees and are going to make sure they're paid well, have good benefits, etc. So here's just a couple little graphs showing these things. So again, median wage income being 33% higher, and that's for non-college graduates, parents, workers of color, single women, etc. Better benefits for medical and life insurance, paid maternity leave, specified tuition reimbursement, having a flexible work schedule, subsidized childcare. And then, again, this is the big one, having that opportunity to accumulate wealth through their business ownership, household net worth being 92% higher. And so employee stock ownership plans hold $1.4 trillion in retirement assets for workers, with individual worker accounts worth on average $130,000 across ESOPs. And so at a time when 4 in 10 Americans don't have $400 on hand for an emergency, long-term workers at an ESOP can retire as millionaires. Mm-hmm. And so I think part of why this can be so transformative is that it isn't just upper-level management who's getting, a stock option or something like that and building wealth. It's a worker regardless of their income level. And so whether they're on the shop floor at Salem Fabrication or working in a music store, et cetera, they're able to build that wealth through their ownership.
Yep.
Do you want to speak at all to benefits paid out to employees, employee accounts, anything?
Yeah, we've been very engaged in the ESOP community, and so I hear many stories of warehouse fork truck drivers that retired, and they got in excess of $1 million. So I mean that's just a great American story, to tell. And even folks that work elsewhere in the organization, administrative roles, things like that. Same story. If they've been there a long time, there's a good chance they've got well into the 6 digits of money for their retirement. And that's in addition to Social Security, in addition to their 401k plan, in addition to any personal savings that they've amassed over the years. So yeah, it's a great addition to building wealth, for these employees.
Yeah. And then some of the community impacts of employee ownership. So one that we really care a lot about at NCEOC, and is kind of one of our big whys for wanting to do this work, is closing the wealth gap and addressing wealth inequality. And so again, I've said this over and over, but employee owners have that opportunity to build wealth, making employee ownership a powerful tool for addressing wealth inequality, and in particular, racial wealth inequality. And then also kind of at a community sort of economic development level, business and job retention. And so when utilized as a succession planning tool, employee ownership, it really is a triple win for the selling owner, for workers, and for the community. So the owner gets fair market value for their business. They have an exit strategy. The worker owners get the opportunity to build wealth, and jobs stay rooted in the local community, and businesses stay open long-term in the local community. Anything else you want to say about Salem?
I think I covered a lot of it. I can't think of anything right now. So just looking forward to our evaluation this week and see how we performed. So that's always an exciting time of year. And since I'm CEO and of course with our CFO, I get to look at all the account balances for all our employees. So that's a great day for me when I get that valuation booklet and just go through our 75 employees and see the wealth that they've built. It puts a big smile on my face, and I know that those folks will have a very good retirement once they finally decide to retire.
Right. Great.
Question for Mike real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned like some of the older, longer tenured folks maybe have can look forward to 6 digits in their accounts because they've been doing this work for a while.
Right.
Do you also have like a regular investment plan too? So do you have a 401k plus?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's even more
Right.
savings there. Wow.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You get to retire with a nice little chunk.
Right.
Yeah.
So with the ESOP side, for the past 11, 12 years, we've been targeting 14% contribution into the ESOP account.
Okay.
So that'd be 14% of your salary. Okay.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been a
40% is a pretty big chunk.
pretty
Yeah.
healthy benefit.
Wow. That's awesome.
My contact information is here, as well as the NCEOC website. So next week, or not next week, in 2 weeks, we'll be going more into what the conversion process looks like versus kind of a high level of what employee ownership is.
Super excited about in a couple of weeks to kind of do that deeper dive so people can ask those questions. But appreciate you guys
Good.
coming. And
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Thank y'all.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
no
We
problem.
learned a lot in these.
Yeah, I bet you have.